This is going to be a video on how to make this action figure display stand. So the first thing we're doing here is we're cutting the foam. We already had the basic shape cut, and I'm going to separate this by scoring it and then snapping it. You don't have to cut all the way through. You never want to try and cut through on one pass. You would take maybe 3 or 4 passes. But in this case, we did the score and snap method, which works very well for things like this. So I wanted to get the bottom nice and flush, so we're going to sand this because the snapping it leaves a little bit of a debris on the bottom there, so that's nice. Now, next thing we're doing here is we're just going to start adding some lines. So this is going to have that stone look. So just adding some lines. You could use the ruler, but you know, for something like this, you really don't need to. I'm going to be adding in these freehand lines here anyway, because it's it's a rough stone. If it was brick or something that was more machined or specific looking, you might want to use a ruler to lay it out. But for this, there's no need. So we're just going to continue carving using a utility knife here, and you could just cut the lines in however you want. Sometimes you'll want to cut them thin and then open them up with a pencil, but this particular one I'm making it kind of give it a stone look, so it didn't really matter. So now we're just adding some texture with a rock, and this is an aluminum foil ball. This is a common method to give like a stony look to your dioramas that are made from foam, especially. It imprints really well. So as you see, we're really cutting very loosely around these blocks because we want them to have like a rough cut stone look. It's not like a brick or a modern cinder block or anything like that. So you could get kind of gnarly with it. You don't have to be super neat or anything. The less of those little fuzzies you have when you're cutting, like the little jagged edges, it does look a little bit better, but it really doesn't matter. Once you paint it, it's gonna look good either way. So I always cut around the sides also. We're just speeding through some more texture. This is all aluminum foil ball. I keep several different aluminum foil balls because they all have like a slightly different imprint. Adds a different texture. So I decided I was going to put a top on this, like a cap piece, some extra stone. So just carving that out real quick. It's just a little feature to kind of make it less boring than just a floor and a wall. So whenever you're doing something like this, anytime you can add any other elements that kind of pop out from just the plain floor and the wall, it adds quite a bit to it. Just more interesting for the eye to look at. So we're doing a base coat. Now I'm just using plain old black craft paint. Sometimes I mix Mod Podge in with the paint if it's something that I want to have be a little stronger. The Mod Podge will add an extra layer of strength to the foam. Also, the Mod Podge will, if it's a large surface, it'll kind of seal the holes in the foam, and it's hard to say, but I really do think it takes less paint to cover after you add the Mod Podge on the base coat. But lots of times for ease of use and just making it easier to clean my brush, because that glue is a little rough to get out of your brush, I'll just use plain black paint for lots of this stuff. And all the paints I'm using, they're just about the cheapest craft paints you can get, because honestly the watery types of craft paints really work well with this porous material. So we're going to use a wire brush here to add the wood grain to this beam feature we're going to have in the middle of the diorama, or the display. It's not really a diorama, it's more of a just a stand. But adding in this wood grain is really easy, and it's amazing how much it transforms the foam. Just dragging the wire brush along. Sometimes it gets a little too jagged, and you could tilt the brush at an angle, but different brushes actually, they come made of different materials. They'll give a different type of finish to the wood actually. It cuts deeper into the foam depending on what material the brush bristle is made from. Once again, we're just going to base coat this with black. Sometimes with something like this that's a piece of wood, I would base coat with burnt umber or like a dark brown, but black works just fine. You just might get a more grungy looking piece of wood depending on how you paint it at the end here. We're going to go with some pretty bright colors on the base coat on this one. This is sometimes I'll take black and I'll just dry brush onto it, but I decided here that I was going to go for a different approach. After watching some other videos, actually, some other diorama creators doing a lot more with flat colors and then adding like a wash over it. So we have like a slate kind of blue and then a medium gray here. Just going to paint that up. Now we have like a suede, I think this one. It was either suede or tan. I don't have it right in front of me right now. Just painting in. And I didn't get everything, like all the little black spots, but I decided I was going to go with orange to kind of make it pop off here. And once again, once I add the black wash and I dry brush it, every layer of finishing you add over this, it will draw everything together. So when you put the black wash on, it's going to knock everything down and make it look duller. And then you're going to do the dry brush, and that's going to add a highlight to it that's all a similar color across all the different stones. So it'll pull it all together. So right now we're adding black wash, and all this is water with some paint in it and a little bit of dish soap to help it kind of flow into the cracks. That's a formula I got from, I think it was Black Magic Craft was the guy who I saw doing that. I used to always just do my black wash with just water and paint. I never did the dish soap, but honestly it works a lot better with the drop of dish soap in there. So this is the top piece once again, like the cap, and we're putting some suede or tan paint on here. Just gonna get all that taken care of, and it would have, if I didn't add the black first, it would have been it would look a lot different. So I still, even though I'm blocking it in totally instead of dry brushing and using the black to show through in the seams and everything, it really, you would notice it, and it's really hard to get this paint to cover in one coat. So you usually have to use 2 or 3 coats when you're doing something like this. So now I'm just putting some medium brown on here. This is going to be that wood beam. Didn't do a whole lot of dry brushing at this phase, just kind of slopping it in there. Alright, so now here we're at the dry brushing. I'm using a very light color here to highlight around the edges. So I am going to paint everything, but I'm putting most of the paint around the edges. Sometimes I do this, it's just, I don't know, it's not really realistic. It's just a look that I kind of like, that makes the the brick or the block like this kind of like pop out a little bit more, because it has almost like a highlight just around the edge. And I'll do this lots of times when I'm doing like fantasy dioramas or dungeon style stuff. It's a little bit more cartoony, I guess, but maybe not cartoony. I don't know, maybe comic-y. But it's something that I like to look at. Sometimes I'll do it the opposite and put the light in the middle and the dark on the edge, but I like this look. So also we're gonna not only just do it around the edge, we're also gonna put some in the middle here and there. But oops, got a little too much. When you're dry brushing, you do want to wipe the majority of the paint off of the brush so you don't smear it all over the surface. I mean, you could go as sloppy or as neat as you want, but sometimes it looks nice to have an even dry brush depending on what you're going for. So now we're going to get some light paint and continue doing the dry brushing here. Just going to make sure we wipe some of it off on the scrap foam, and we're going to dry brush the base part here. So once again, we're going around the corners of everything, all the edges, doing a little bit in the middle, but more to the corners. And you see that crack where the rock smashed into it. I want to make sure that I highlight that a little bit and just kind of feather around the corners. I mean, you could do this however you like. You could just take the brush and drag it across the whole thing, and it will look totally fine, honestly. But however you want to do it, you'll get a feel for it. Once again, I just kind of like highlighting the edges and all the little cracks and stuff. Sometimes I'll use more than one color to make it pop. I'll use like a light gray like this, and then afterwards I'll come in with like a white or almost a white just to highlight the very, very edges. And we're just going to repeat that same step. Make sure we're wiping our brush off to get the excess paint off, although you don't have to, but that's how I like to do it. And just dragging the brush lightly across the surface. And you want to keep the brush at an angle to the surface too while you're doing this to make sure the bristles just kind of graze across the texture that you added. So I cut this slot out here. I didn't film that, but I just used the utility blade I have sitting right there. And we're going to fit this wood beam in here. I'm using some tacky glue, but you could use hot glue or any other kind of white glue as well. Hot glue would dry a lot faster, but I think the tacky glue would have a hold a little bit better in the long term. So we're just going to fit that in there, and yeah, that looks pretty good. So tacky glue is going to take a while to set. We're going to have to leave it alone for at least a few hours. Usually I let it set overnight. So after I was done filming this, I added a set of magnets in to secure the top to the bottom piece. So I hope you guys try to make some, and if you do, go ahead and tag me on TikTok at Random Dioramas or on Instagram at Random Diorama. I'd love to see what you make.